leave that up there for a second. It looks like most people are getting named. Okay, well, I will go back up to the beginning because I also want to engage your mind in a little bit of thought as we kick off the third session, because environmental justice isn't just about addressing problems, addressing pollution or negative environmental characteristics. It's also about preserving the good things, that the environmental benefits that are present in your community, and making sure they're available to everybody. So I wanted to see if everybody would be willing to share one environmental asset that your community has that is worth protecting. Cool. I like seeing what people are valuing in their home neighborhoods. For me, one of the exciting things about San Diego and other parts of highly dense Southern California is the resistance of our canyons and our steep slopes to development. So it preserves little pockets of often underappreciated open space where the native species and the endemic plants can find some refuge. Excellent, thank you for that. I left this slide in here just to remind people. I think I did not give you much time to look at these things, but I was just recommending a couple of resources for your consideration. The first one we're going to talk about quite a bit today. So if you didn't read it, you will get an introduction and you can go back and explore this resource. But I also saw these videos that EPA had created as the 10th part of their 10th anniversary of their environmental justice program. And I just really liked what these folks had to say about the importance of like, what are the important things that a person has to do to begin to address environmental justice and correct environmental injustice at a community level. So I thought that was pretty inspirational, and I would encourage you to go back and look at those videos and maybe share some of them with your students and have them, you know, kind of see what they take away as the important message from these environmental justice leaders. The videos are usually kind of 2-3 minutes long. I want to thank again one more time all of the fantastic people who are listed here on this slide, who have put together this series as kind of an extension and a support for a much larger diverse effort to bring teaching for environmental literacy and environmental justice, and really just quality resources to teachers. All of the subject matter projects, the people in the California Environmental Literacy Initiative and 10 Strands are doing really fantastic things. And so hopefully you'll see this as an opportunity to learn more, and to kind of turn to these organizations and see what else they're doing around environmental justice, because they're all doing quite a bit. Okay, so one more time past the map. And one more time as we kick off our final session, to just reflect on this Indigenous land acknowledgement and the fact that now we're ready with some information, some resources, and some motivation to form that more thoughtful and respectful relationship with the land and resources of California, and to guide our students in doing that as well. So that's part of what I mean by identifying you folks as environmental justice pathfinders. And so just making sure that we stop to think about what it means to be on this particular piece of land in this historical time, and what responsibilities and opportunities come along with that. Okay, so just to bring us up to speed on the goals of the series, I know some people have missed sessions and have gone back and watched the videos and connected with me after the fact, and that's fantastic. Sorry about the long delay in getting session 2 out, but we managed to do it. So first of all, we started with really just introducing a place-based approach and how that could support interdisciplinarity, and just what geography and geospatial tools could bring to teachers engaging with the environment and environmental justice topics. In session 2, we shifted on to thinking about how place-based inquiry and access to relevant data can help us bring an environmental justice lens into teaching and learning in different subject areas. And so we kind of got a lot of information. We connected with the historical movement for environmental justice by looking at the 17 principles of environmental justice and seeing where they came from. We, talked a bit about the racial and ethnic disparity in terms of exposure to pollutants and environmental hazards. We looked at how the Environmental Protection Agency has incorporated environmental justice as a, oops, I'm gonna maybe mute people. Okay, good job co-hosts. And we, all along the way, we're really thinking, that's just off the edge of the screen there, you see our environmental literacy ladder, right? We're building not only our knowledge and skills, but also our attitudes and our disposition to address environmental justice. So now here we are at session 3. And the goals of the series are the same, but what we just want to make sure at the end of the 3 sessions, in the time you've invested in this, that we're pointing you towards resources and supports that are available to bring geospatial tools and environmental justice lens into teaching and learning environments that you occupy, that you care about, and that you will be an important part of, the central hub of the way in which teaching and learning happens for your students in your classrooms. So this is hopefully a point at which you're feeling like you've gotten something you can walk away with and use. And so you've asked about resources. We've shared resources on the Cello website that have been kind of crowdsourced from all of you. And we'll continue to add to that, but we've also done some work as a result of this program that we're going to share. So let's continue on here. What we're going to be doing in this session is we're going to focus on some resources that we've created freshly for you. So we've got a tool for lesson planning and for thinking about developing curriculum for your students around environmental justice. We're going to take a look at that. We're also going to look at a community screening tool for environmental justice issues. So you can use Cal EnviroScreen, which you've already been introduced to, but you can use that tool to figure out what are the issues that might be affecting your community. And we're going to look at some other websites and printable resources and apps that support inquiry and kind of remind you about what's on the Cello website. So the purpose here is to hand over the baton to you and see you guys continue on your individual and team paths to implement the ideas, utilize the resources, and address the important local and global challenges associated with environmental justice. Any questions at this point? Are we ready to go? I hear silent muted yeses.
Yes, we are. Good morning. We are ready to go.
Excellent.
Woo!
Thank you.
Yes.
So we're going to start with what our group has been spent a lot of time meeting and planning for these 3 sessions. And of course, there's things that get on the cutting room floor because we don't have an unlimited amount of time. I mean, you probably have other things to do on a Saturday, but we have important information and we want to support you in addressing environmental justice. So one of our members said, it'd be great if we just had a tool, something that really helps people think about and plan and get into environmental justice topics. So that was the birth of an idea that resulted in a tool that we're going to share with you now. So there's links on the slide And if you have the slides open, but they're also going to appear in the chat. There they go. So I will keep a version of this on the screen just in case you're on a device where you'd rather just look at the slide and download this later. But this is a tool that we've made available as a PDF form and as a Google document so that you can use this, keep a copy and use it yourself. And I'm going to turn it over to Emily to kind of talk about this tool and how it might be useful and some of the things that this group, much more than me individually, but the group, lessons they've learned about addressing environmental justice issues.
I'm going to cut in and just say that although I know you intend for people to make a template of it, it seems like people are having trouble accessing it all together, which I'm really sorry for.
Oh, let me see if I can work that.
Okay, so thanks, Amy. And while Tom is working on opening access, if you couldn't gain access, just refresh your page in a minute or so, and I'll go ahead and start introducing this tool. So for those knowing that you will all get into this. And Tom has created both a Word or Google document for you to edit and use as you might, but there's also a PDF version, which can also be editable if you have the right Adobe account. So just to start off with, I think it was a few years ago, well, first of all, several of us, many of us on this development team, we belong to an organization called CALI, which is the California Environmental Literacy Initiative. And we've been meeting regularly for many years to identify issues and determine support for environmental education across the state of California. And so a few years ago, Shelley from the History Social Science Project and Maria Samani from the Science Project and I, we started talking about environmental justice and decided that we really needed to learn more about what that was, what that meant in communities and in schools, and how that might be useful for teachers in their instructional planning. And so part of the result of almost a year of exploration and then the bringing together of the California Subject Matter Project, regional leaders and executive directors from all 9 of the disciplinary networks. The result of that was a report on environmental justice, which if we haven't shared access with that yet, then we will certainly throw that into the chat and the resources that are available to you. And so in that report, we were able to, after talking to a lot of people from a lot of different areas of the state about environmental justice, we came together and decided that there were 4 big ideas that relate to environmental justice for K-12 educators. And so you see in the first column here, each of those big ideas, and then in the next column, some questions or considerations for you to think about as you are planning your lessons, your units, your projects, whatever it might be to address environmental justice in your classroom, whether you are teaching elementary, middle school, or high school, whether you're teaching mathematics or history, social science, or the arts. There's lots of ways for lots of entry points for helping your students to understand not only the beautiful assets in the local and global community in which we live, but also those issues that require our understanding and our attention. And so looking at that first big idea, which states that teaching about environmental justice should always consider local, personal, and cultural contexts in order to engage students and better relate to issues in other communities and on a larger scale. And so I think you've been experiencing this in the previous sessions in looking at air pollution or water issues or other environmental issues from your own personal experience, from your local context. And we know that students across the grade levels, they look for meaning, they look for relevance in whatever it is that they are studying. And so when it comes to environmental justice, we should not be introducing concepts that just relate to people far away and out of sight, out of mind, out of experience, but to start with those issues that are relatable, that are meaningful and understandable to ourselves and our students. So some questions to ask yourself in addressing that big idea. What are the environmental justice issues affecting your community, and that can be approached in ways that align with your instructional goals. So we also want to make sure that you look, there are many options when it comes to environmental justice issues in any given community. And so the challenge there, of course, is to align that with either your content knowledge that you're developing through your discipline, or the disciplinary skills, or even dispositions or tools that you introduce to your students through your environmental studies course or your geography course. Also to ask yourself what questions do your students have about community health and well-being? They are the experts here. They're the ones trying to figure out why they're having difficulty breathing, or their diets are being restricted, or family members are having medical treatments, or routes are being changed in their community, or access to canyons or hiking trails or beaches are being affected by environmental issues. There's some other questions there that you can take a look at, and to trying to get to that big idea. I think that Tom, you did an excellent job with these kind of compelling questions that can stimulate our thinking and our instructional planning. But let's move on to the second big idea, which is that teaching about environmental justice should always be grounded in history. We don't ever want to, mislead students to think that these issues just sprung out of thin air, whether it's a weather event or changing, damage to forests or soil erosion, whatever it might be. But there is an historical component or context to whatever that issue is that students are seeking to learn more about. So you're kind of guided here to look at what sources of information exist about this issue, and to explore the people in the community who might be able to share that local history, if not from a formal documented information as formal documentation, but those people who've lived in the community for a long time and hold the oral history of the region. Is there a future goal that has been set locally and or globally in relation to this issue? And this is where, here in the state of California, we have legislation that calls for every city or region to have a city sustainability plan or a climate action plan. And so committees are put together, and there's a process for bringing the community together to identify what those issues are. So digging into to that part of looking at the history of the environmental issue is important. The last two there, the first one, environmental justice, is inherently interdisciplinary as it illuminates the interactions and interconnections between humans and the environment. And that's what our environmental principles and concepts are all about, right? Bringing together the natural systems with the human systems, and also recognizing that environmental justice is not the job or the curriculum for any one discipline, but that this, to address environmental issues, environmental justice, it requires the skill sets, the knowledge, the dispositions from all of our disciplines to come together for the best possible results. And the last big idea there, teaching about environmental justice should always encourage and incorporate action, making change outside the classroom via activism, organizing, and community work. And I love these questions here to guide us in thinking about what organizations and what individuals already exist in our communities working on these issues. And we're going to hear an example of that after this. But also, how is it that you are helping students to find the appropriate avenues for action that are matched to their levels of knowledge and interest in this particular issue? So a lot of this work doesn't happen confined in the classroom. It bleeds out into other classrooms and into the community and into the thinking and the preparation that our students are engaged in for their futures, whether it's a future as a community member, future college pathway or career. There's lots of positive outcomes for doing this work. And then Tom also put some notes at the bottom there about, we'd love to hear your feedback on this tool. Is it helpful? Are there things missing? Is there another way to guide your work and bringing this into your classroom? And so he added some notes there that might be of interest. But I'll finish there and see if there are any questions or comments about this tool. Oh, sorry, Victoria, I just saw your message.
And thank you to whoever asked about the closed captions, because I did not know about that. That's great. So Kathy says she's interested in how to weave media literacy skills with environmental justice practices. And that's exactly one of the reasons we were so excited about having cross-disciplinary participation here, is so teachers could really think about where the intersection between the content and skills that they teach and this opportunity, where to find that and how to work that seam, so to speak. So we need your help. We're giving you ideas and resources and I think some great perspective from the subject matter projects here, but definitely we're excited to hear more about that.
And I'm looking in the chat here. Jim asked the question, when we talk about environmental issues, we're also including cultural geographic issues too. And Tom, I don't know if you want to say something about that in light of the work that we've been doing recently around the GeoGlobal, looking at different perspectives of global, spatial, and environmental.
Yeah, well, I think that question gets to the heart of the purpose of this series. So I'll try to be as brief as possible and not expound greatly, because what I responded was that essentially this is environmental justice looks at the human geographies, the way in which we organize ourselves and our activities in space, and how that intersects with the kind of space of natural systems and generates unequal outcomes. So geography is a tool, thinking about the way in which people are segregated in space, or the way we designate different areas for different activities. Like this is a residential area, this is a power plant, this is a place we're going to have a port facility, or we're going to route a highway through here. All of those things are producing a political and a social and a culturally defined space. And then when we look at how those designs generate, in some ways, predictable and almost, in some cases, even intentional unequal outcomes, that's where we can start to kind of unwind environmental justice, diagnose what's happening, and start to figure out the actions that are going to address the problems and create a more sustainable future. So that's my shortest possible answer on that. But yes, it's always also a cultural geography problem. If anybody ever denied, was resistant to accepting a kind of environmental justice lens is presented, one way to test their commitment to their position is ask if they want to swap locations with another group of people that has raised the issue. And say, well, if it's not an issue, let's just swap places, because maybe it's not about that. So okay, cool. Any other questions? We wanted to make sure there's time to process, and maybe teachers or educators here have an example of how they've engaged students in thinking about an environmental justice topic?
Can you repeat that, what you said at the end, please?
Just if there's examples you'd like to share of work that you've already engaged with to address an environmental justice topic with students or with your school community. Just because we've been thinking about it for months doesn't necessarily think we've come up with the good ideas.
I have a question.
Yes.
I put it in the chat, but anyways, I work, hold on, let me do the video. I work with I'm in an academy at Hoover High School, and I teach biology, 9th grade, and I have been working with the English teacher who teaches English and ethnic studies together. And we have tried pretty much on our own, or like following like a certain kind of path, and it sort of looks like what the document that you showed us, but I always have difficulty with the doing the last component, which is the action component, because I feel like I'm removed from like my background and what I teach. I feel like it sort of affects like, okay, let's take the action. And I'm like, what's the action? So like, for example, like we did air quality, and we were supposed to, so it was last year, and the action was supposed to be where we make, I don't know if you know of those boxes that filter out. Yeah, so we were supposed to make those, and then the students were to decide who to give it to or which family members, and we would talk about asthma and stuff like that. But since it was, last year was kind of a little bit different in that it was difficulty with all the like behavior stuff that we had to deal with. And so we like ran out of time, so we weren't able to do it. So I guess what I'm wondering is that what we ended up doing instead was taking a field trip to Chicano Park, which is like close to the to where there's a lot of industry and
Right.
Yeah. So we were supposed to show them, oh look, you know, this is the, you know, unjust the way that.
So this you're touching on something I think is oh, go ahead, Emily.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Tom and I, we know City Heights very well. We've worked with Hoover High School a lot and that community. And just a couple notes that I want to make about the take action piece, because we do hear this from a lot of teachers in our work with global education. I think it's important to know that, or to remember that the actions that we want to inspire and motivate and support students in taking don't necessarily have to be a project that you do together in class. Allowing students and noting to students that what they're learning should generate some actions in their own personal lives, and then to have those conversations and allow students to share what they're doing as a result. So for example, Chicano Park is right on the edge of Park Avenue or Park Boulevard, and there's lots of construction going on, and the air quality in that part of our very large city park, Balboa Park, is very different than other parts of the park, and students have done those air particulate matter studies. So the question becomes, why is that? Why is Chicano Park pushed to the edge of this part of the park, and what can be done about it? And so those things, those conversations can happen in class, those ideas for what can be done. Figuring out who do we talk to about this, or how do we alert people so that they're not having their health impacted because they go to the place that is culturally, you know, relevant for them, and not realize that there may be, whether it's ingesting certain foods or waters, or it's the air quality, whatever it might be. So I do want to note that there are ways to address this big idea that don't have to be a formal project that you do and you assess and you collect in class and then move on. But at the same time, you want to do something together as a class based on what they're learning, what they're uncovering, what they're concerned about, what questions they have. because otherwise we pile a lot of very depressing information on kids, and we don't let them know that there's a utility to that. There's a usefulness of that information and that frustration that they carry with them. Tom, I don't know if you want to add something.
I was just going to say that for me, and one thing that I've built into the Cello website as a resource is I'm a big civil society person, and I know that we emphasize leadership and entrepreneurialism and a lot of individualism in schools. But if you notice how environmental justice issues have been raised and addressed and effectively addressed, it's not by people working alone. It's by people getting together, learning, assembling resources and knowledge, and kind of using the leverage they can get together as a group of people. So one of the things that I really encourage is to direct students when they're learning about these topics. So like Jim Bentley shared an example there, in some cases, students can go directly to decision makers, to public officials, and describe a problem adequately and request an action. That's fantastic. Maybe they won't learn enough within a unit on air quality to think about what to do, but to find out who is addressing that issue in their community, how they can support that organization, and what that organization needs from the community is a great, it's not just a shortcut in the classroom for figuring out what a meaningful action is. It's something the student takes forever, right? That organization has got that role and that commitment in the community, not in the school or in the classroom. That's their thing. And that's what I really think we need to make sure students are learning about, so that they can be an engaged citizen and support those organizations that are addressing the priorities that are important to them at a community level. Okay, we missed something that Geraldo said that sounded amazing. Social media campaigns, right? So there's ways for students to raise their voices and project their voices. We're going to present one later, actually, which is just one, but there's lots of ways for this to happen. Okay, we, in the interest of, this is a great conversation, and I hate to move us along, but also we want to show you resources. So the California History Social Studies Project has a great resource that's been produced monthly, right, for some time, and it's called Current Context. And so we wanted to share that with you and share one particular issue. So I'm going to turn it over to Shelley Brooks, who knows more about this because she's been directly involved, and I will go back to sharing my screen and let Shelley tell you about this resource.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you, everyone. This is great to be hearing all of the ways that you are engaging in this work, and I'm thankful to be part of the conversation with you. I wanted to, perhaps some of you have had a chance to take a look at this because I know Tom sent it out in advance. I also just put a link in the chat to this resource. And this is, as Tom said, part of a larger series that has a lot of current events, news that is embedded in its historical context, and that really tries to engage with really important issues around the environment and around climate change. But you may find other resources when you dig in there, because I've been writing this for many years, and we'll touch on other sorts of topics sometimes too, when it's timely and when I have the bandwidth to do so. So I wanted to just talk about this as an opportunity to think through, case studies as a way to engage in with students about learning an environmental injustice in their community, perhaps, or just as importantly, in another part of the country or of the world. So that they can understand more deeply the issues involved, the nuances, the complexities of it. And so I wanted to mention that this approach of a case study feels accessible, I think, because it's taking an issue from a theoretical, to a more practical, relatable realm. And so in this case, I chose an issue that was both in the news about the Lithium Valley initiative to extract lithium in the Salton Sea region for renewable energy, because it felt important and timely, but also because it's in California. It's a place that students in our state have an inherent interest in, I believe, but also they see the importance of the issue down the road in terms of renewable energy, and for their own futures and for the generations after them as well. And so I wanted to talk through briefly, give a brief overview of the content, but also to discuss the components that I incorporated in the process of writing this in a way that I hope makes the issue informative and interesting for students. And so I looked, like I said, at the extraction of lithium in the Salton Sea region, which has been helping fuel the rechargeable batteries that are needed for electric vehicles, right? And also solar and wind energy production, the batteries that store that. And I'm always a proponent of using primary sources. I come from the history realm, so I wanted to have students immediately get the sense of the importance of this by hearing from someone who's intimately involved. So I quote the chair of the California Energy Commission, who explained that lithium is, quote, the oil of the clean energy future, right? So giving students the words of someone who's involved, so that I don't have to tell them it's relevant and timely, but that the primary sources can speak to that. And obviously, because this is for, I come from that realm of history, and I'm thinking about policy and a bit of economics, because I'm writing for history, social science classrooms. I also think about the fact that no environmental or climate justice issue isn't related to many disciplines, right? These issues are multidisciplinary in nature. And so I tried to touch on at least some of the science and the health considerations as well. And I think the same could be said in reverse, right? Talking with colleagues of mine who work in science education and thinking about how to incorporate the history and the government considerations, policy considerations as well, to give students the bigger picture. And so what we know is that obviously Salton Sea has been the site of geothermal extraction, or geothermal energy production, I should say, and that in the process, people discovered that lithium is one of the minerals that is extracted. You can tell I'm not a scientist, I'm not able to say this very clearly, but that as lithium became increasingly a valuable product in and of itself, there have been these conversations about, well, how do we tap into this rich reserve? I didn't know this in advance, and I was really surprised to learn that people who study these things estimate that the Salton Sea region has probably a third of the world's supply of lithium. So obviously this area is going to have importance for renewable energy. But I wanted students to know about that and its significance, but to think through too that that any new production, the complexity of producing means that there are greater environmental impacts to keep in mind, right? Because new production, such as creating a new electric car, any consumerism, these issues have environmental impact, right? And so while they may be more green in technology, then students still need to think through, what does this all involve? How do they want to participate or not? Or how do they want to challenge systems? How do they want to engage in a way that feels appropriate and responsible moving forward? And I think, really to get into the EJ side of this, I wanted for students to be able to think, who feels the impacts of action or inaction on environmental and climate issues? So while tapping into this large domestic supply of lithium could, of course, help increase the country's renewable energy production and decrease its reliance on foreign supplies of energy, these advantages need to be balanced against the potential disadvantages, right? And so I pose this as a question, knowing the power of inquiry and how students can frame their learning around this, with this question of, how does the United States move forward with clean energy technologies without causing a new batch of environmental problems, and problems that inevitably have social consequences as well? And this gets to, I think, the question Jim put in earlier, just how interconnected all of this is. And this is going forward then, as students are digging into this, I think the historical context, the present day context about the region we're studying and its people becomes so important. Understanding what drives the local economy is often critical to being able to sort out the complexities of resource use, land use, jobs, environmental impact, local health outcomes. And to help students understand all of those complexities, this resource provides some historical context and points out that the Salton Sea has long been devoted to agriculture. And just this, what probably many people know, but I don't think it's necessarily obvious to students, the fact that what we call the sea, the Salton Sea, was created on accident in 1905, right when water was being diverted from the Colorado River for agriculture in the area, and heavy rains flooded the canal, the irrigation canal. And before everything could be fixed and righted, the water flowed into this depression of the Salton Sink and created what is the Salton Sea. And so this agriculture is continued, obviously, and large-scale agriculture and all that involves, all of the machinery and the chemicals and the diesel exhaust from trucking and so forth around it, means that there's a heavy pollution burden in the Salton Sea region. And this is so important to keep in mind while looking at potential new economic endeavors in the area. And so one clear consequence of the pollution is that young people in Imperial County log twice as many visits to the emergency room and are hospitalized at twice the state's average rate. Twice the state's average rate of emergency room and hospitalizations. And so we know that people, though, of all ages in that county suffer some of the highest rates of asthma in California. So the connections to environmental justice, the connections to the importance of why this matters for people's health and well-being are just front and center. And so coming back to this issue of lithium, clearly it would be unjust if lithium production in the Salton Sea area concentrated the unhealthy byproducts of lithium mining in a region already experiencing a high level of air pollution. And so the how to then think through the different questions. And I wanted students to try to grapple with and get their minds around some of the questions that people in the region are asking themselves and discussing and engaging with. And so this classroom resource includes questions that such as, how will this project, if this goes forward and with massive lithium development, how will it provide jobs and job training to local residents, right? How will this actually benefit local residents economically? How will profits help fund local development, such as high quality schools, libraries, healthcare services, right? Because obviously it's going to have a health impact. Or another question, how will environmental standards be established and enforced so as not to lead to additional environmental degradation? And so just wanted to wrap up, but I wanted, of course, this final big point, like we were looking at the tool that Emily described earlier, is helping students see the way forward or action steps and how communities can make positive steps toward managing these concerns around development and climate change. And so I point out that the community in this Salton Sea region, Imperial, in many parts of Imperial County, that there are already community-run air quality monitoring programs and communications to help raise awareness of unhealthy air days, keep people informed and indoors, if possible. And also I mentioned the Lithium Valley Commission that's been convened by the local assembly member, which includes community members as well as industrial leaders and elected officials. So 2 community members are local Indigenous leaders 2 more are local community organization leaders. So these are people who, I think this is a good model, right, of how we can be in conversation with all the different stakeholders. The final point that I would emphasize is that we can choose to frame these issues with students by highlighting the power and the agency we have as individuals and as communities, right? So that to envision a better future and to make choices today that will move us toward a more hopeful and a more just reality. And I think that's so important for us as the adults in the room to be having that orientation with our students. So I'm looking forward to the continuing conversations. I know we have a lot to get to, but please, if you want to type in chat or any questions or anything I can provide more information about, and love to hear any feedback.
Thank you, Shelley. And I know we're a little behind, so I'm just going to be very quick here. I appreciate so much, and I know so many of our teachers do, this series of articles, this current context that you work so hard on a regular basis. And this in particular is such a timely, they're all timely, but where I sit in San Diego County, I know what a big issue this is. And back in 1986, I was a reporter for the Brawley News and the Imperial Valley Press. And I think back, as you were talking, I was thinking back to the agricultural and water issues that centered around the Salton Sea that were such an important issue at the national level for those farm workers and those communities. And it has evolved in so many different ways. I do want to point out in the bottom of this article, or of this, you call these articles, of this current context, my favorite part is that photograph at the very bottom that shows not only those the representation that you talked about with this committee, that it's not just the adults who are participating in this work, it is also the youth. And the teacher who's featured here, Jose Flores, who's also on Cali with us, he was a high school history social science teacher at Brawley High School. And as he was trying to do this work with his students, he recognized the need for community-based organizations to support his work. And so he started to work with an organization called Comité Cívico de Valle. And over the years, not only have they been a supportive partner, they've developed internships for his high school students. And so you see some of those interns in this photograph. And as they started to recognize issues like, as Shelley pointed out, the increased rate of asthma and the amount of school that students were missing because they couldn't use their inhalers, they couldn't get their medication that they needed because of laws in California that prohibited them from having a medication that's prescribed by a doctor outside of the United States or outside of the state. And since so many of these farm worker families, they go across the border for their medications, they were not able to bring their medications to school to use. And so they would stay home. And so these students with this organization, with lots of community members, they went up to Sacramento and they fought to have that law changed, which was fortunately successful. But it's that one issue is leading to another, and to hear that that Lithium Valley, as they're now calling it, they're taking what they've learned, the history of that region, forward as they make decisions about how they mine for lithium in that region, and that it's not just about jobs. So I just wanted to point out the importance of working with your community organizations, seeking out who else in your community is interested or frustrated or supportive of exploration and action around those local issues. And I think Jose does a nice job explaining that in this article. Tom?
Thank you, Emily. I was double checking I'm not muted. I just think that topic is such an excellent example of the complications and how you really can't boil it down to a pro or con position, because it is crucial to the future of that community that they have environmental safety and environmental sustainability, but they also need jobs and means of support. And there's a global imperative to shift off of a fossil fuel energy base. But it's also important to be mindful of and attentive to the local burden that might be created by tapping into this, world significant depository of lithium. So it's very amazing. And we're going to go to our next tool. And I know we are not going to have enough time for all the discussions we could have from this. And I'm already anticipating we might need just a quick pause for me to get the correct link to the next tool. Let me just do that. So are there any questions or comments people have about the lithium case study? No. Okay. All right. Well, we will plot forward. I'm going to go back to the slides, and I want to introduce another tool. Whoops. A second tool that we've created. So we've spent a good amount of time talking about air quality issues, and we introduced you to the CalEnviroScreen tool that is created by the state of California to help address environmental justice statewide. And so we created a tool that will allow you to go to CalEnviroScreen, and well, it doesn't allow you to, you're already allowed. It will help you and support you in going to CalEnviroScreen and accessing information about your particular community at a local level. So what this looks like, and Amy is putting in the links, and I'm sure you guys will let me know if the permissions are wrong. This may be part of the hangover of just getting my computer back up and running yesterday. But there's a Google Drive, a Google Doc that will force a copy and create one in your own Google Drive folder. And then there's also PDF versions that you can download. One is a fill-in version. And on the screen is what the first page looks like on the left-hand side. And essentially, there's just some instructions on accessing CalEnviroScreen and in capturing information. So the instructions are kind of in black type. In blue text are some prompts or some questions for you to respond to. And there's also live links in the document that take you to CalEnviroScreen. So what we had in mind was to give you like 15 minutes. And so when we say 15 minutes, that'll probably become 15 Zoom minutes, which maybe is more like 10 minutes, to explore this tool in a cursory fashion. So initially, you're going to pick a location here. I'm recommending you do your school, but you could choose another location and use that street address. Now, when you get into into the CalEnviroScreen, that address is going to be the thing that anchors your investigation. So you're going to pick whatever address of interest you have. You might not know the answers to a lot of these other questions. Hopefully you know the address in the city, county, and zip code, probably the name of the place. But these other things you might not know much about, so just check those. On page 2 at the top here is the link to the indicator maps. So first of all, you're going to use, in part 2, you're going to gather information about population characteristics and about the pollution burden. It would take you too long, so I'm just recommending you pick 2 or 3 population characteristics, pick 2 or 3 pollution burden variables based on where you suspect there might be something defined. Okay, so this is part 2. You're gathering information. In part 3 of the tool, there's some ideas for data analysis at the top of the screen in blue. You probably don't have time for that right now, but you can see some of the suggested activities you could do with your students. And then there's a link here to the results map. So CalEnviroScreen has basically tell me what I need to know about this place. So when you go there into the CalEnviroScreen results map, type in your address, you'll get the total score. It'll have access to a lot of the information you've already seen, but not so much of the explanation. So this is how you're going to find out basically what the pollution burdens and what some of the population characteristics are. As to Jim's question earlier, it is a cultural geography question, but it's those combination of things that produce environmental justice concerns at a local level. So the step process we're going to use here is you're going to use the environmental justice screening tool. Hopefully you've been able to download the PDF or access the Google document by now. You're going to go through part 1, part 2, and part 3 in a accelerated kind of skimming fashion. Then we're going to take 5 minutes, and we'll tell you when to shift to this and give you a link to some Jamboard slides, which have just some prompts about what you did and what choices you made. And then we're going to put you in breakout groups, as I mentioned, geographically, to just kind of discuss the experience, how you might use this going forward, what you're taking away. So are there questions about the process right now? Questions? Yes, thumbs up. Okay, what I recommend you do based on my experience in session 2 is I recommend you turn off your camera on Zoom to allow your bandwidth to be devoted to the CalEnviroScreen maps that you're going to be exploring. But we're still here, so if you run into a problem or you don't know what to do, you just come off mute and ask us or type in the chat. Okay, and then after this first 15/10 minutes, we will tell you and give you the Jamboard link and ask you to kind of shift gears to do that. Okay? So I won't be the slightest bit concerned when you turn your cameras off, because I know you're doing work. I just added in the chat the links for the two maps. The indicator maps link was working for me, but not the results map. Thank you for participating in our live test. Yes, Jim.
Can I ask a clarifying question on where to start with school address part 1?
Yep.
So I'm on the Calendar screen, and if you want to put me in a breakout room if you want to talk, I don't want to disturb other people looking. Is that?
I think it's okay because they might have the same question.
Okay. So I'm on the Calendar screen, main page. I just got the walkthrough introduction. Where would I type in? Oh, am I just going to the magnifying glass? In the
Upper
top
right corner magnifier glass. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I put a little picture of it there to because
Did
it's busy. On page 2, it's got a little picture of the magnifier in the corner.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
We have another question in the chat. How do you find the census tract?
So once you search on the address, and I'll give an example of how it comes up. Then if you click on the location that comes up in the map, I believe it gives you a pop-up. So I will unshare this slide and show you what it looks like on mine.
That'd be super helpful.
Okay, so I'll go back to the start. And if I reload this, okay, first thing you had to do is click outside this window to get the map activated. Up here is the search. So I'm going to type in there. I'm going to put in my home address.
Just kidding. It's not his real home address, you guys.
That's true. It's not. It's not at all my real home address. And then I click on there and it gives me the census tract number right here. And it tells me the number of people in the census tract. And then it gives you data about that particular variable. So then once you're on your location, you can switch through the different maps and continue to observe either by address or just by census tract. This map here is live. And you can explore around how things vary around you. If you're surprised that you are high or low on something, you can see where some of the transitions or the different scores are. So here's Hoover High School here. That's where I should have used. Let's say I'm using Hoover High School. And there's the census tract for Hoover High. Hooray for this working online.
So Tom, just to be clear, you find the location first and then you're filtering through on the left-hand column to see different.
Yeah, exactly. So what is in these indicator maps, each indicator is dealt with separately, kind of a single variable. And so you choose on the left-hand side which variable you want to look at. And then it has, for me, always reloaded to the same location. And then if you click on that location with your mouse, it brings up the information from that indicator.
So I've got an interesting challenge. There's an Elk Grove like Illinois, but there's also an Elk Grove, California, and I am not seeing Elk Grove, California pop up on this map.
Interesting.
When I type in like the street address of my school.
So I get Elk Grove as a place.
But my school consistently keeps popping up and
so I know you don't teach at Joseph Kerr Middle School.
No, check this out. Yeah, here let me give you my address, my school address.
Okay.
I just put it in the chat for you with the zip code, and it keeps going to like where are we? We're in Nebraska. just says USA.
So the search, for those who are asking, is in the upper right-hand corner of the map. Of each map has this search function. And if you click on the spyglass, it pops up this window here where I'm trying to search for Jim's school.
Yeah, there you go. Either both of those are the same.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's my school. How did you get my school? And I didn't. What?
Skill. I don't know.
Okay, wait. No, it just went there for me now. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. I'll be quiet.
This is why we wanted to be here for you during the live test. Question about minimizing so that, whoops. It's a good question. I do not know the answer to this.
There's a little arrow in
You
the
can
middle
drag it.
of the right-hand side, and then you can, yeah.
Okay, so you collapse that information, but the menu of topics is still there.
Yeah.
Now I'm missing that menu of topics. Can I ask you why?
You can. I don't know why.
I've got a how to use this map. I've got my location showing. I got my census tract showing, but I've lost completely that left-hand column. Do I need to click on a element in the pop-up? No.
I don't think so. So like, I mean, you see my screen right now, and if I click on a location, I get the pop-up, but I still have this left thing. So I would tend to maybe reduce your browser window and then maximize it to see if that's an issue.
Okay, let's try that.
You know, sometimes a sneaky scroll bar shows up at the bottom of your browser window. Okay, so it's entirely possible that people's bandwidth is causing issues with all of the information displaying quickly. I experimented quite a bit, and the website works well and is not too slow, which is interesting given the amount of data it's processing. So hopefully it will work for you better at other times when you're not on a Zoom call. Okay, we, in the interest of ending on time, I want to make sure maybe people are struggling enough with this that we shouldn't invest in the breakout rooms. What do folks think? I turn to you, my participants.
I think breakout rooms could be interesting in order to compare like how we're navigating this. I just reopened Calendar screen and that left bar came up again. So I think that was just a glitch. Maybe
I think the folks are the chat people are wanting to stay together. When things get dicey, stay together. So hopefully the folks that are seeing things work or people that were able to see on my screen, you know what it would look like. So that gives you a sense of whether maybe it's just not loading. We can give you the Jamboard link so that you can answer that. That's a good idea. Jamboard link coming. There you go. So please do, once you've kind of gotten some information about your community, and hopefully you did, visit that Jamboard and just share some of what happened. Yes, Gabby, that's the good news is the technology was working for you. The bad news is you got a lot of information that could be, you know, it's the facts about what's happening in communities, and this is important information for us to know. So while you're working on the tool still, I'll just say that some of the things I imagined that this could be used, for example, if you teach at well, actually even at a elementary school, chances are your students are coming from more than one census tract. If you're teaching in a middle or high school, students might be coming from as many as a dozen different census tracts, depending on the position of your school, but certainly multiple census tracts. So there's a way for you, yes, Geraldo. So let me give you the link again. I also got that 404 on that link. So I put the link in the chat, which is now gone far up.
So Tom, can I share something that's interesting that I
Yep.
noticed? So going to the hazardous waste layer, it shows like battery collection places like at Target or CVS. It's interesting how it's randomly, yeah, I mean, little green rhombuses that are showing any place that any sort of hazardous waste, like we have a special waste collection center that shows up. This is fascinating.
So one of the things you'd think about, okay, well, why is that? Where's that information coming from? My guess is that there's a permitting process to be able to collect and dispose of those materials which have been listed as hazardous. So it's really nice that IKEA wants to collect all our batteries, but the state of California wants to know they know what they're doing when they get a truckload of batteries and need to dispose of them.
And then you can also see, oh wow, you can also see clusters of household hazardous or hazardous waste sites in which I know are some lower socioeconomic status neighborhoods in South Sacramento. And there's definitely none around the country club in Elk Grove. This is fascinating.
Yep, and just like the example of the Chicano Park neighborhood where there is metal plating facilities that are unusually and uncharacteristically close to residential neighborhoods, which are not allowed in other places. So you can start to think about, you know, for students that are a little older, maybe think about why. What are the rules, the zoning rules that generate guidance on what's allowed in one area versus another? That's what, you know, that's what an informed citizen needs to know to be able to start thinking about taking action on environmental justice issues.
Oh yeah, like the cleanup sites layer. I mean, it's heavily concentrated in downtown parts of Sacramento, but you go to the suburbs and they're non-existent.
Yep. So that's why I like the fact that you can explore around those maps and you can start to see what the kind of terrain of your local area is. There's kind of a landscape of pollution burdens. There's a landscape of population characteristic variations. And when those things start to line up, right, and you start to see that, hey, these people that we can, in a historical sense, understand have had lower political power, lower economic power, maybe have faced some discrimination in society. When those folks, you can identify where they are on the map and then also see that they're experiencing higher pollution burdens, you can start to say that's not an accident of geography. That's a design.
It's a pattern, yeah. Is there a way to toggle on, say, like asthma with air pollution? Can we do, you know, PM 2.5 and asthma at the same time, or is that, can we show multiple layers?
This tool only allows you to do all layers at once in the result map or individual indicators. Now, for those of you who are interested in using ArcGIS Online, all of these individual indicator maps and the results map are all being served up on ArcGIS Online, the same software that I use to make the maps that I shared about air pollution causes and consequences. So you can, in ArcGIS Online, access the individual layers, import them into a map, and do a combo of 2 or 3 or even 10 individual variables.
Okay, so that makes sense. So where do we get the name of the layer? Would we use what's in the pop-up? So low birth weight results?
Yeah,
Or like,
that's what I would do. And I would do Cal OEHHS and look for layers that they own.
perfect. Okay.
So, and they are labeled as Cal EnviroScreen 4.0 layers in.
And that's in, that would be in Living Atlas.
Yeah, in ArcGIS Online public share, not in Living Atlas. So
You lost me there.
Living Atlas is a collection of layers that are owned and served up by Esri. But
Okay.
there is an infinite number of map layers that are publicly shared on ArcGIS Online that just aren't part of Esri's Living Atlas. And for those
So
of
as
you
I'm
who
going,
don't know what we're talking about, apologies for the specifics, but that is kind of when you get into using the ArcGIS Online software, one of the benefits is being able to access these layers of information and not just view them, but manipulate them and analyze them.
but I would be searching in the layers tab. As I'm creating a new map right now, I would search in layers. Okay.
Yeah, public, all ArcGIS Online public, and you'd look for those. And you could probably just do a Cal EnviroScreen search term.
So
I see
ArcGIS
Kathy.
Online. Okay.
Okay,
Didn't mean to cut you off. Kathy has her hand up also. Kathy from Ventura.
yes, Kathy.
Yeah, I guess that's fine. I was just going to comment on a couple of things that I found really interesting because I looked at where my house is, and we live out kind of in the country up towards the Ojai Hills. And so, you know, it seems very natural out here and everything, but we are in a very narrow valley. So I was very surprised, well, kind of surprised at how high like the asthma rate and some of those things were, because there's probably not a lot of good airflow through here because we are sandwiched between, you know, mountains, and you could easily see that on the map. I expected the air quality to be much better than it was, but it's not. It was so that was kind of fascinating. The other thing was, I think it's interesting to think about how we perceive what our environment is versus how it's graphed in the data or detailed in the data. Like one of the data points was traffic impact. And we are a 2-lane highway, and so it didn't come up as a very high number, but there's traffic especially on the weekends. All the motorcycles go up and down. I think since we've lived here for 2 years, there's been 4 major accidents right in front of our house. They've taken out electrical poles. They've done, I mean, so it's just interesting to think about when you live in a place, how do you perceive those impacts versus how is the data quantified? So I just kind of found that a little bit fascinating. So
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that I know in San Diego there's a little bit of a surprise sometimes. You know, for example, here people have moved out towards the foothills to get more space, more you know, more environmental benefits, but because the air blows off of the ocean, one of the things they do is they move themselves into the bad air zone unintentionally. And so our bad air experience is not where the bad air is being produced, it's where the winds are pushing it up against the mountains and it's collecting. So even though the freeways have, you know, a plume of exhaust emerging from them, where it's really collecting and concentrating is in the foothills. So there's some sometimes surprising twists in terms of the way it plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I spent enough time in the Riverside San Bernardino area to know that phenomena.
And I think I wanted to point out, just in terms of this tool, when you get to the end and you go to the results map, one of the things that comes up, and I don't know if anybody got there and found this out, but suddenly you get the race ethnicity data on the people in the census tract. So initially, that's not one of the population characteristics you might have noticed. But ultimately, it is reported there. And if you think back to some of you looked at the story map on the results of CalEnviroScreen 4.0, after this data were published, they looked at this and said, hey, there's a real divide. If you look at the least impacted neighborhoods in terms of the burden of environmental impacts, it is 67% white, 33% people of color. If you shift to the 10% of most impacted neighborhoods, look at what happens in the composition of the people there. So that's why I say, yes, it's pretty much always a cultural geography and environmental kind of characteristics issue. It's not just the natural environment and the ways in which it moves things around, although that can be a big factor with the winds, with the currents. You know, ask the folks in Imperial Beach near the border how currents affect water quality, and they are experts on this. Those things can be accidents of location and elements of the physical environment or characteristics of the physical environment, but we're also producing the community spaces in which we live. And those can be those can be quite telling when we start analyzing how these things coincide in space. Okay, so thank you guys for struggling through with the challenges with this first time out of the box for the tool. So I'll fix the link within the document, and I will make sure to get all this information to you in a follow-up email in a way that you can know you're accessing the corrected version. I did, as we're now like 5 minutes to go, so I'm not necessarily going to take much time on this, but I really did want to remind you that the starting point for these webinars was really the creation of this website, the Cello website, California's Hub for Environmental Learning and Action. So some of the things that were in that tool we looked at about kind of how to think about and frame and get into an environmental justice issue, there's a lot here to work with. So we've looked at the environmental atlas and the maps that are there. You can email me and request I create a map on a topic. I would be open to that. But also look at the inquiry toolkit for formulating those questions, from going from what your students notice and recognize and wonder about their community to learning more about the issues that are behind what they're seeing. Figuring out who the active agents are in their community, where they can get more information, where they can learn more about how to address these problems. I put a star next to the storytelling showcase because one of the things that you guys need to do as environmental justice pathfinders is share your concerns and share what you're doing so that other teachers can kind of follow along. So I'm going to be sending an email to everybody as a wrap up to this. And one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is respond to a survey, but also to share a story on the Cello website so that people will know that we've started this process. We're working on addressing environmental justice at a community level in a way that informs, educates, and activates students. And of course, there's going to be educator resources. So the materials from this session, from the first two sessions, all of the things that we're gleaning from the chat and from you guys is going to get included in there in a way that's downloadable and printable, because that's what you asked for. So at this point, we need to congratulate you on being the environmental justice pathfinders that you are. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate you testing out these tools and helping us to learn. And I want to encourage you to continue to learn, to teach, and to share back with us. And so, you know, this is just the beginning of a kind of a new trajectory for you, but also for what we're going to be doing with the Cello website and with our engagement with environmental justice going forward. Now, some of you may remember that there was an offer of a stipend, and you are due a stipend. Here are the things that have to happen. you're going to get a final survey from me, and that is actually got $50 attached to responding to it. That's one thing you need to do. The other thing is you should have gotten an email from Lauren Sanchez, and I put her email address and the date of her email there. So you could go back and find it if it's in your spam. She needs a W-9 to generate a payment. If you don't want the money, or you're like, I'm an altruistic person, or my time's covered by something else, that's great. But please do also respond to the survey. Other than that, I'm opening it up to the floor. Is anything anybody would like to say to close out our time here?